Hello all. I've been a long-time reader of this site and others like it since I recently found out about a betrayal by my wife. Guess I thought it was time to share a bit of my story and seek some advice. My only concern is some of the specifics would cause us to be identified fairly easily. Anyone got a view how to prevent that? Thanks for the reply. I suppose it's fairly obvious, but it's some of the nuances of this that I'm really questioning in my head that I really need some advice on. Just trying to figure out the best way to describe this to you peeps to get the best advice. Appreciate the reply. Fair enough, thanks. I'll share more tomorrow as I'm knackered and going to bed, probably to lie there awake for most of it thinking where this all went wrong, like a nightmare I want to wake up from. But it's my new reality. Okay, well, not sleeping again, so thought time to share a bit more. Here it goes. Not sure where to start, but I will try and give enough to help. Sorry if it's too long. My wife and I are in our 40s. We've been together now for about 25 years and married for 19 of those years. We have 2 children, both daughters. We met through mutual friends and got on great together. Just had a good time and it felt right. Before we actually started seeing each other officially, my wife was seeing a good friend of mine. Even though we were all young at the time, John was known as a bit of a player and used to have a different girlfriend every week. He was my best friend and I have known him since we were about 8 years old. Literally grew up together, later on enjoying going to sports events, beers, etc., etc. I was his best man at his wedding, for example, when he moved on to someone else. Sometime later I started a relationship with my now wife, and we've been together ever since. My wife and I have fairly high moral standards, and decided to wait until we were married before we had sex, so we were each other's first in that respect and a lot of other respects. When we first got married, we were both skint, had fairly poorly paid jobs, but we didn't care. We just wanted to be together and decided to get hitched and things would work out. Fast forward a few years, I rose up the corporate ladder. She also decided to retrain and got a good job working for herself, earning good money, so we are comfortable in terms of money, no worries there at all. We also had the children during this time, and all was going really well. I was working long hours, but the pay was good, and I was providing for my little family, so happy to do it. The only downside of that was how little I actually saw them. My wife started working fewer hours as she was raising our children. But it didn't matter mostly, and it seemed the best approach. We've always got on well with John and his wife and their 2 children. In fact, our kids used to play together, and we'd go out as families for meals, holidays, etc. John and his wife were struggling in terms of their marriage, and the wife decided she'd had enough, and they divorced. This was in 2019. John seemed cut up but didn't actually ever try and persuade his wife to stop the divorce. In fact, his view was, yep, time to move on. Obviously, I cared about my friend's well-being and he spent a fair bit of time at my house. We supported him through a very messy divorce. During the same time, my wife and I were still happy, although we were spending less and less time together. At the end of 2019 and into 2020, we would literally eat together, then watch TV in separate rooms, then go to bed. Not ideal, but I figured that's kind of normal for people married for nearly 20 years. Sex life was okay. Nothing great, but okay. Again, 19 years later, we're not exactly going to be going at it like bunnies, newlyweds anymore, right? I also started noticing her on her phone all of the time, and I mean all of the time, but she's big into social media. And it's not like I was sitting next to her anyway, so it didn't bother me too much. What did start to bother me was the way she was always using the phone at an angle, taking it everywhere with her. One evening though, she came home and for some reason left her phone on the dining room table unlocked. So I took a peek. What I saw in her messages nearly floored me, and I mean that genuinely. I started shaking and nearly keeled over, but I grabbed my own phone and took some pictures so I could read the messages properly later. They were messages from John, but the ones that floored me were from some other guy. Let's call him John too. She had been texting this guy and ending the text with hung in 30 etc. etc. It also appeared to me he was supporting her emotionally in some way, calling her beautiful, and trying to arrange to meet her. Her texts back to him were clearly friendly, overfamiliar, but she was making excuses not to meet but promised to call him. I think he had bought her a present and wanted to give it to her, but she was making excuses not to meet him. However, it was enough for me that night to basically accuse her of having an affair with John too. The really odd thing, when I made the accusation to her, she assumed I was talking about John 1, not John 2. She denied anything inappropriate. And when I demanded she show me her phone, the messages had been deleted. Of course, when I showed her the pictures I had, she then backtracked slightly but explained he had been bothering her and she was trying to nicely get rid of him, that they had met during her weekly exercise and they had started talking and exercising together, but nothing had happened, and actually she was fed up with his attention now and was trying to make excuses not to talk to him anymore. changed the park she exercised in, etc. They had never met outside of that. I asked what he was trying to give her, and she said some flowers to cheer her up. But she said she didn't want them. I should also say here I think my wife is very body conscious and never been happy in a bikini, etc. Even though I've always thought she looks great, she has always been fairly insecure. Therefore, any thought she could have been intimate with anyone else was a million miles away in my thinking. I was more concerned with the emotional element, and she had maybe been naive with her interactions with another guy and sent out some wrong signals. I said to her I wasn't happy with the text. She should not be sending anything like that to another man. Even if you are trying to nicely get rid of someone, be careful of the signals you send out, etc. Then went to sleep and didn't think too much more about it. Think that will do for now. I will continue later. Reader comment. Based on your initial story, it seems like your wayward wife is having an emotional affair with a friend, John, who just got divorced with his ex, who's also your friend. Have you discussed the evidence you gathered with your wayward wife? Was it just an emotional affair? Was it ever physical? When did the affair start? Did your wayward wife admit it to having an affair? All the best. Original poster. Thanks for the reply. I will get there, I promise, but it's such an effed up situation you could not make it up. Okay, following the initial shock, I started thinking about things more and started to question in my head what my wife was telling me. Things between us were also getting worse. No arguing or anything like that, but I sensed a coldness, indifference from her that was not a great place to be. I ended up drinking more and I guess trying to drown out how I was feeling. Still, we had so many years behind us, nothing going on right. I decided to check on her honesty and placed a tracker in her car just to verify what she said she was doing was in fact true, so I sat back and watched. So a couple of weeks go by and I noticed a strange pattern in that her movements were really odd. She would go where she said she was going, but then go and sit in random locations before she came home. Also, I would text her to ask her where she was, and she would say one location, but she was clearly somewhere else. Never for long, but enough that I started thinking, why are you lying to me? Then on one occasion she said she was going shopping, but her car was sat in a side road. I asked her about her day when she got home with some clothes, etc. It all seemed normal. The next day I then did something I completely now regret. I said to her, we need to talk. We went out and I said, tell me about your day yesterday. She did, recalled everything she had been doing, and I basically said, I know you're lying to me. Your car wasn't in the place you said it was. Questioned the how would you know that, etc. Eventually I lost it and told her I had placed a tracker on her car. And I know you've been lying to me. I then got the you're wrong. Stop controlling me. I knew you would do something like that, so I decided to test you. My friend picked me up and we went shopping together. I did do what I said. You clearly don't trust me, and I think we should separate. So, wow, I was like, where did that come from? Slow down a bit and talk to me. She then proceeded to give me the whole ILYBINILWY bit. She's been deeply unhappy for years, and if it hadn't been for COVID she would have left. Obviously, I was totally floored and started to scramble to save my marriage. I should also say at this point the tracker battery died and she started to hide her car key from me as she was concerned I would get another one and she couldn't stand being watched. Also at the same time I started to look for how to save your marriage type sites and looked and started reading forums on TAM. I read various stories from others and started thinking, hold on a minute, this happened. That happened. Surely, she's not having an affair, not my wife must be wrong. But the more I looked, the more I started thinking this must be happening, and somehow I missed it. I also got annoyed at myself for admitting the tracker was on the car. Some of the advice on there focused around changing yourself, so I started to get fit, more active, drink less, etc., etc., etc. Also, I asked for more time, and we could put whatever the issues were right, not to leave without giving it a chance. She agreed, but I found out she was miles ahead of me. Had talked to her parents about how unhappy she was, had talked to a lawyer, etc., etc. I was feeling totally defeated and just could not believe what I was hearing, but thought I will continue with my self-improvements anyway, as I was feeling loads better in myself, and I honestly thought at this point she was going, so I needed to prepare. I also spoke to a lawyer about my options. So, one of the things I assumed was if anyone it would be John too, so I spoke to my good mate John 1 and asked his advice. What he said made me wince. He just said, speaking from experience himself, if it's time to go, just go, start again. Don't bother trying to fix something if she wants out to let her. That's what I did, and I'm loads happier. Everyone else I shared issues with gave great advice on how to save the marriage. I just thought to myself, well, he is the only person I talked to who is divorced himself, so I suppose he has a different perspective. A couple of months go by. I'm working from home now due to the pandemic, spending more time with family and trying to be a good dad, etc. We're doing loads of stuff together as a family, and eventually my wife said, you know what, the New York great, I want to work on us. This was slightly out of the blue, but also great news to me, as I couldn't bear the thought of splitting my family up. I loved her, and my kids. I did remember though that I had to watch actions, and this is where I started thinking, what's going on here? Nothing is changing. She's still cold, indifferent even though she says she wants to work on us. It was like she was stalling and waiting for something else. I then decided I was a poor pie, so I hired one. He was great, good suggestions. Said, do I really want to know, etc. But I said the not knowing was worse. He started on a plan to follow my wife discreetly and report back. So, a couple of operations in and nothing. I'm thinking, okay, that's good. Then eventually one weekend morning he was watching her, and she met John 1 at a fairly secluded location. He said he couldn't get close, but all they did was talk and walk. Now keep in mind we were in lockdown, so this should not have happened. Learning from before, I decided not to confront too early and suggested to my pie to keep going. I did wonder if the meeting had been accidental, but he said no definite meet at a specific time, place, etc. At this point my mind is all over the place. I did check in with the wife to ask her randomly when she last saw John 1, and she was like, oh, weeks ago, so I knew she was not telling me the truth about him. Couple of weeks go by and they met a few more times. One incident involved her getting into John 1's car and them driving to a secluded car park. My pie followed and said they were talking, arguing, and nothing physical happened as they don't have enough time. His view was it looked like she was trying to get away from him. He certainly couldn't say for certain they were having an affair, but of course he did say the obvious, why doesn't she pick up the phone if she wants to talk? Maybe they have had something at some point, and she's trying to break it off. So I am now convinced if anyone, it's got to be him. I decide I've seen enough and I will confront. To be honest, my health was good, but my sleeping at this point is shocking. I've moved from desperate to save marriage to who is this person I am living with. Maybe it is time to move on. Can't trust her anymore, etc. So divorced AY1 approaches, and I start with the whole, when did you last see John 1? I gave the response weeks ago, etc. Then I say, okay, I know you're lying, only the truth from now on or I divorce you myself. She's slightly nervous now, starting to moan about a few things and asking why. I want to know. Not your concern who I speak to. I am allowed friends, etc. Still denying everything. I present some evidence that I know they have met. Then she confessed, okay, yes, I met him once. Then I said, you've met him more than once and I know what you have been up to. Silence. Then he's helping me. He's been setting me up so I could divorce you. I didn't know who else to ask for help. I've met him a couple of times to sort out how I could manage on my own. No, I don't want to be with him. He is helping me as a friend, that's all. She also shared some things with me that I can't write here that made me believe her. She then said something about that was then it's different now. I want to be here with you. I know he wanted to be with me, but I never wanted to be with him. I just used the fact he wanted to be with me so he would help me out with practical arrangements if I left you. Led him to believe they had a future together if he helped her out. I must admit at this point I was like, sorry, but men don't do anything like this for free. What has been going on really? You must have done something. She's then like, you know how I am about my body. You are the only one who has seen me, I promise you. She was adamant nothing physical other than holding hands had happened. She then said, I totally changed my mind. Recently it's been great, and I want to stay, work on us and really make a go of it. I totally regret lying to you about meeting him. The next couple of weeks were amazing. Actions by the plenty, if you know what I mean. She couldn't do enough for me, felt like we were newlywed, etc. There is more to come. Reader comment. Sounds like your wife's AP doesn't want her full time and she doesn't want to be alone, so you're her plan B and she's sticking around. For now, original poster. I have to say that is one POV I hadn't considered. The alone bit, you are spot on, but it may help if I continue the story, and this is where you will all probably say WTAF, move on already, and I kinda get that. Here goes. So great couple of weeks. We're back to better than normal. All good. Or so I think. Completely out of the blue I am contacted by John 1's now ex-wife. She sends an extremely blunt to the point text to me saying, John 1 and your wife have been having an affair since 2017. You should get tested for STDs, etc. As he was not the first affair your wife has had. So, I'm like, WTF is going on now? Ring her up and she's told me John 1 has grown a conscience and admitted to her he had an affair with my wife while they were married prior to their divorce. He also stated some details of how it started. He claims my wife was having an affair with John too, that she thought she had caught some STD and panicked. She couldn't talk to me about it, so decides to go to John 1 for help. Like a KISA, he comes to her aid and sees her into the clinic and helps her out. They then unbelievably start their own affair. This goes on for the best part of 3 years. Yep, 3 effing years. Right under my nose. I had no clue this was even happening until I started looking after the messages I saw on her phone and got suspicious. But even then, 3 years. So again, my world ends. I have no reason not to believe what I am hearing. Why would she lie? Roll on divorce day 2. Kids are out. So, I confront my wife about this new information. It takes about 5 hours total, but she eventually admits to sleeping with John 1 and John 2. She says it started with John 2, then she confided with John 1 her concerns in reference to STD. He took advance and basically threatened to tell me if she didn't continue with him, she was, I quote, his slave. Now I was in complete shock. The perfect moral wife with body issues was sitting there sobbing her heart out. I basically said to her, we're done. I cannot believe anything you say anymore. Get your lawyer ready. After much pleading from her, I said maybe we could see if we can move past it. Way too early to make that decision, I know now. Obviously, she's over the moon and says she'll do anything I want to make it right. Still in complete shock, she then went to see her mom and dad and confessed all to them, and I sat there saying I would try and work it out with their daughter. She also told a number of family and friends what a fool she had been. She seems to be showing full remorse and is trying to work hard on us. Part of the issue for me was the utter anger I had for John 1. I had known him as a friend for 30 years. How could he do this to me? Oddly, I was looking past my wife at this time. All I felt was total sadness and pity for her, not anger. I felt she was a victim. Now as time has moved on, I'm now in, hold on, she made the commitment to me, not him. I married her, not him, so my anger towards her is building at a very quick rate. Also, the slave image and what that would entail is just awful to contemplate. I am also struggling with the Plan B bit. She says after John 2 she knew she had destroyed our marriage, therefore she never saw me as an option. She couldn't come clean and tried to make a go of it with John 1. Then decided she wanted out of that, and that's why he basically threw her under the bus as she wasn't cooperating anymore. That's what the pie saw them doing, arguing together with him, threatening to spill all if she left. Part of me thinks he just grew bored of her, moved on, and thought may as well destroy their lives while I'm here. Great friend, eh? The weeks pass and we're struggling with some kind of half-asses reconciliation. I'm swinging daily between honoring her and booting her out. She is trying and answering all questions I have, even though she basically doesn't want to talk about it if she can avoid it. A massive issue here are our children, who don't really know the whole story and would be devastated by divorce and obviously the fear of having to start again, etc., etc. I've spent my whole adult life with this woman and feel I should try and give it a go before I pull the trigger. And am I being a complete and utter fool here? It's one thing to think what you will do in this situation, but another to actually be here. It's all just so messed up. Oh, and one other thing, the POSOM John tried to contact my wife. She shared with me his note, basically asking if they could see each other and work it out. Like WTAF again. She showed me and it proved to me she hasn't been in contact with him before the note. It was something I insisted on, and also complete openness of phone, etc., which she has given me. Am I being a complete idiot to even consider this and somehow being able to move on? I obviously don't trust her in the same way I did before, and I'm also wondering if I should ask my pie to get back on it just in case. I've said I can't and won't do this again. It's been unbelievably hard already. Sorry for the long post. Not 100% sure yet how to respond to specific posts. But to answer, I'm surprised you didn't realize early on that John 1 was not your friend and you asked him for advice. So, it became clear to me later on what an absolute fraud this friend of mine actually is. When I talked to him, I did so thinking I am fairly sure it's you, but I wanted to hear what he had to say, especially about the John 2 text. Of course, at that time I didn't have the full picture, but had started to not trust him, and then what he said confirmed for me it was very likely him. I actually thought it may be a surprise for him to know she had been texting someone else, but he obviously already knew that. I just couldn't prove anything and didn't want to confront without evidence. Thanks all so far. It's really difficult to read some of these comments, but I know deep down it's the truth. It's different when you know the person they concern rather than reading a stranger's post. This is my life. I have huge concerns, she will repeat. The absolutely scary thing is how easily she lied for so long and I didn't have a clue. The levels of deceit are incredible. I'm amazed she could pull it off. In terms of the why she did it, I keep trying to get her to open up, especially about the first guy. I get the distinct impression it was 100% his words and he played on the lonely housewife bit, need to have some fun, etc., etc. Now interestingly, his wife has no clue this has happened. He is in the type of job where this could happen regularly. If I tell her, it will cause huge issues, obviously blow up their worlds, but also to our finances, as I am fairly sure my wife would be unlikely to work again. I know I should, but it would be crushing in any divorce if she couldn't work anymore. She says I know it all now. There's nothing else to say. She carried on with John 1 under duress, so tried to make a go of it. She slips a few comments out every now and again though, which make me think doesn't sound like duress to me. I also think I am definitely her plan B. I'm not feeling loved in the way I used to, and I know she's capable of this. I've been with her long enough to know the difference. It's like I'm a chore to keep happy. I've asked her where her head's at and she keeps saying give it time. But if I'm honest, I feel like the last 3 years have been wasted, and I keep feeling if I'm going to restart, the sooner the better. But it's a massive step, and if I do decide to go, then I think I need to be 100% committed to that direction. What a mess. So, I'm trying to reply to these posts, but struggling, if I'm honest, with how to get specific parts. Anyway, this is exactly how she says she felt. The thing is, though, once he did confess, that's not how I felt at all. It took him a long time to trust that I really wanted to wrecking, since you two were each other's first and had saved yourselves for marriage. I'm sure she felt tainted and like you'd never want her back once you knew. Also, just to say, she has agreed to have NC with any of the APs. Of course, now John 1 is public enemy #1, and she says she can't stand him. She's desperate. I don't speak to him, mind you. Not sure what to do there, if I'm honest. My own therapist suggested I do not, as how could I trust anything he said anyway? Seemed fair enough. She has agreed to do counseling, if that's what I want her to do. However, I want her to go to counseling on her own steam. She has given me all passwords and passcodes for social media, phone, etc., etc. Reader comment: she doesn't want you to speak to him. I wonder what he may be hiding that she doesn't want you to know. Original poster: yep, exactly what I have been wondering as well. I'm going to take a break and do some work. Really appreciate all the comments so far. I've never been in such a difficult position in my lifetime. There's so much more to this that I have posted thus far. Even the long posts don't quite communicate it properly. But I've already been given lots to think about. Thanks. So that's one of the things that's annoyed me the most. John 1, his marriage was failing. It was only a matter of time. John 2, well, he was separated. I'm then like, WTF about our marriage then? Sheesh. Okay, it gets a complete mess quickly, doesn't it? John 2 was first. He is a tradesman for the purposes of this forum, a plumber. He did a job in our house, and as you can tell, outstayed his welcome and continued his services for 5 months. John 1 is the friend who she confided in. Their affair started soon after the test. Clear, by the way. Then continued. My wayward wife has absolutely confirmed she was entertaining all 3 of us at once at one point. Yep, incredible. I should say J1 and J2 knew about each other. But she eventually broke off with J2 as J1 is the jealous type. You couldn't make this up, could you? As for J1 wife, she wanted to apologize, but the OBS wants nothing to do with my wayward wife ever again. Oh, and Normie, which I felt a tad harsh. But up to her. Thanks all for the replies and suggestions. I was fully expecting the run comments, as quite frankly I am still utterly horrified by this whole thing and still trying to get my head around what just happened. I completely agree I offered reconciliation way too early. One of my many regrets in this situation. I will try and answer some question as best I can. But I fully know I am not being told the whole truth and doubt I ever will be. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and just keep in mind I was learning about all of this as I went through a period of approx. 7 months. This didn't all just come out. Some things were shared on DD2 that didn't have to be. I wouldn't have been any the wiser. And also, as time has gone on, as my wayward wife answered my cues, more started to come out. I have tried to explain it here, but it's not easy, so some details that explain certain parts I cannot share. Okay, John 1, me and wayward wife have basically grown up together in the same friendship group. He was dating my wife, but for a short time as teenagers before we then all started to grow up, get into serious relationships and marry, etc. We all remained friends as explained. It's absolutely possible that John 1 could have been having an affair with my wife for a long time and throughout the marriage. It's possible. For me, though, change occurred in 2017. My wayward wife became what others have described, a different person. This was also obvious to me in some areas, but also difficult to explain. She was just different, more outgoing but less affectionate with me, etc. I am also having a hard time accepting the STD testing story, other than the fact I have texts from her in 2017 that confirm her basically saying things are not quite right down below, and she wanted to get looked at. Now, why didn't that ring alarm bells for me? Well, let's just say also at the same time I bought some accessories to spice things up as our SX life had dipped and she blamed them. Why didn't she reach out to someone other than J1? 2 main reasons, I think. My wife is all about reputation. It's incredibly important to her, and I believe she was having at least an E with J1 at that time. She told me she sent him a message basically saying she'd made a huge mistake, etc. Could he help? And as you now know, he helped. Now, why didn't she just go on her own? This didn't make sense to me either, and did make me wonder if it was something else, and I hate to even think it, but like a pregnancy removal or something. I was spending nights away during that time, so she could have had something scheduled, needed someone to drive her, etc. To answer another cue, the OBS of J1 had suspicions, but could never prove anything. She included these in her divorce papers, but also loads of other stuff. One of the reasons she was so upset was she didn't talk to me back then with her suspicions. She finally found out due to the J1 confession. In terms of OBS2 with J2, she doesn't know this has happened at all. I have never met J2 after I found out about him. The telling of OBS2 is something I am struggling with and referenced earlier. It would definitely damage my wayward wife earning potential. That is selfish from my POV, I get that totally. And talking to her would be the right thing to do, I know. J1 is currently out of the picture and blocked on all of our social media, etc. I have considered talking to him and getting his side of the story, which I know is different to my wayward wife's, as we have a mutual friend who told me what he had said. Obviously, the whole dress thing is missing completely, and they fell in love, knew it was wrong but meant to be, etc. Also, from the note he sent a while after this all came out to my wayward wife, he confirms the time frame that I know about. Also confirms they were making plans for the future to be together and legitimize their relationship after my wayward wife divorced me. I have never known why she didn't just divorce me before all of this came out. Something I keep asking her. So, it's quite possible in my head she's trying to minimize the fallout and hit to her reputation by staying. Currently only our immediate families, close friends know this has happened. I also think she wanted to separate, first test real world living with AP, then divorce, but never had the chance to. Anyway, back to bed. Reader comment. Responding to your comment, I am also having a hard time accepting the STD testing story, other than the fact I have texts from her in 2017 that confirm her basically saying things are not quite right down below and she wanted to get looked at. Now why didn't that ring alarm bell for me? So, she hasn't completely hidden it from you. In this case, her excuses become even weaker. A person of average intelligence would not panic so much before anything became clear. She would go to the clinic on her own, get tested, and if the result was negative, she would continue as if nothing had happened. Responding to your comment now, why didn't she just go on her own? I have no idea. This didn't make sense to me either and did make me wonder if it was something else, and I hate to even think it, but like a pregnancy removal or something. Remember my words, logic is not a very difficult mechanism. If something looks ridiculous, it's ridiculous. If it doesn't look credible, it's a lie. What makes nonsense to you here are her explanations. You wouldn't think so if she had made a logical explanation. It could be a logical lie, of course. Just because it made sense doesn't always mean it was true, but at least it wouldn't make nonsense. So, your suspicion about remove of the child seems much more plausible. Even then it makes sense for her to go with someone. But why with John? One is still unanswered. Do you have the documents of the STD test she had? If there isn't one and she can't show it either, you should ask her which clinic it is and research whether she has had such a procedure. Original poster. Okay, you are spot on here. I have no idea why I didn't see this before. Her explanation has to be complete BS because she told me she was going. Guess this is why a new look view of this is so useful. However, in terms of verifying anything, I don't see how that is possible with patient confidentiality, etc. Of course, J1 will know the truth. Thanks again for suggestions. I've started looking into polygraph testing in my area. I will also ask for the timeline. It's one of the things I said I would insist on, but didn't follow up, so that's on me. The records would be interesting, but I just looked online to see if removing of child or STD testing would be included, and it basically said you could opt out if you wanted to, so be guessing that could be used as an excuse, and or they may not show anything at all. Don't know. I can also ask, right? I suppose the bigger question is, for F's sake, haven't I got enough already to just D? Yes, would be the answer to that, but for some reason I'm yearning for the truth and hanging on. No idea why really. Oh, and this, reader comment. Lastly, the response, give it time, is not the response of a remorseful wayward wife who is all in to rebuild her destroyed marriage. I still suggest you begin to move on until she not only changes her tune and attitude but actually begins and completes the work a wayward must do in order to save their relationship.